Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Bigfoot's Pad Paranormal Radio. I'm King Sasquatch, and we had a couple of technical difficulties there for a minute. Our switchboard is being kind of crazy. Right now I'm waiting for that to load up. And one of my co-hosts on the line, Nick, also known as the Mothman Warrior.
Yeah, hi. Yes. How you doing?
Pretty good. We're having a lot of difficulties on our side.
Oh, okay.
Just waiting for our guest to call in right now. That's what's one of those days, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely.
The usual.
The usual? Yeah.
Of course, one of these shows can't go around without a problem of some sort.
Oh, gosh.
So what have you been up to today, Nick?
Nothing, just sleeping, eating, a little bit of homework, Bible study at church, and more homework and eating. Yeah, hopefully Mr. Greene calls in soon. It'll be a shame if you didn't.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of news or anything, Nick?
Well, I don't have any news right now, but how about them Red Sox? Oh, yeah, I can get some news right here in a second.
Updating right now, so.
I can get some news right here in a second.
Sports acting all crazy. Sorry about this, guys. For listeners, it's kind of going weird at the moment.
It won't let me go on to this. Darn, never mind. I was looking at a paranormal message board that had a very interesting headline. It said, "The end of the world, the Norway spiral, and now this." I was going to read that, but...
Yeah, right now my screen's all white and blank.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, this is not going too well. Oh, there it goes. Well, I know that, which is kind of strange, there's advertising for some new TV show coming out with Mike Tyson. There's the Birdman or whatever. That's kind of strange. That's paranormal.
Yeah. Well, Mike Tyson is pretty paranormal. I'll have to, all he does is, wow. Yeah, I thought he just disappeared and wasn't going to come back, but
I don't think we're ever going to laugh at him.
Wow. Oh, gosh. Yeah, I'm looking at okay, this might be a little interesting. All right. March 13th, 2010. Fox News pays more dues on the 1997 Phoenix lights of the UFO. You familiar with that, Jer?
Yeah, actually I am.
I'll just read a little tidbit I have on paranormaldailynews.com. It happened 13 years ago, March 13th, 1997. Thousands of people called into radio and and TV stations to report something in the skies over Phoenix. 911 operators were swamped with calls, as well as Sky Harbor and Luke Air Force Base. The mystery would eventually be known as the Phoenix Lights, one of the most viewed and documented UFO sightings of all time. Well, do you know anything more about the Phoenix Lights episode, Jared?
Well, I know that the Phoenix Lights were one of the greatest UFO phenomenons ever filmed, and right now we have our guest is on the line.
All right.
Mike?
I'm here.
Oh, hi. You want to do a little intro for Mike, Nick?
Sure. This is Mike Greene. Am I correct? Mike Greene?
Yes, you are.
All right. This is Mike Greene, and he is a expert on Sasquatch and a avid field investigator. His website is Bush. Mike, what?
Bushloper, L-O-P-E-R.
Bushloper.com. I just went on there.
Bushloper. Bushloper.net.
.net. Bushloper.net. It is an excellent website. I've gone on there the past few days and watched both of your films that you have on there, the infrared films, which I'm sure we'll be discussing tonight, and they're really, really exciting to watch. I watched the one where you were videotaping on the windy road in the forest.
Yes.
And the Sasquatch or something comes out kind of where the road turns amongst the trees. But I'm definitely looking forward to talking to Mike tonight. How about you, Jer?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions already coming in, so I was just going to start the show. Yeah, Mike, I was wondering, on the phone tonight, you have me, Jeremy, and then I also have my co-host, Nick, is on the phone. And then a little later, we have one of our other people who's going to call in, but for now it's just me and Nick. Yeah, we were going to ask you a couple questions to get the show started. Could you explain a little bit about your background and what got you started in Sasquatch research and all that?
Okay. Yeah, I have a master's in behavioral psychology, and years ago when I was writing my master's thesis, I was writing it on mass hysteria and Carl Jung. And as I started to investigate various mass hysteria, or what might be mass hysteria incidents, the idea of things like the Bermuda Triangle, UFOs, and then Sasquatches came up. And Sasquatches, the more I read about them, the more I realized that this really did not seem to fit the bill, and that there really seemed to be maybe something there. And unlike UFOs, which you can't just sort of go out and look for, you really could go out and look for Sasquatches. And being a inveterate camper and outdoorsy guy, that's what I started to do. And that was about 20 years ago, I guess. And until almost 2 years ago, 1 year and 11 months ago, I'd had virtually no success whatsoever, and was really getting kind of discouraged. I mean, it's not something you just sort of go out and find. But I happened to run into a spot down in North Carolina where I was camped, waiting for a group of Sasquatchers to join me. But I got there early, and I was camped there by myself, and I'd gotten there very, very late at night. And so I was tired, and I went to bed, went in my tent, and 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to, and I don't know what this was, a strange plop noise, like somebody dropped a tomato on a rotten tomato on the cement or something. And I was laying in my sleeping bag going, what the hell is that? Not alarmed, just sort of curious. Then I heard this was in April, I heard a little rustling in the leaves, but like a mouse rustling. And that didn't alarm me either. The next thing I heard, and this really alarmed me, right over my head, I heard two big, deep, what I call Darth Vader breaths. And I don't think I have to describe them any more than that. Everybody knows what right over my head, and then something cuffed the tent. Not viciously, but sort of backhanded it. And this whacking tents is behavior that's been reported before. Anyway,
were you the only one in the tent at the time?
Oh, yeah. No, I was the only one there. And so not knowing what to do, and this all happened rather quickly, I whacked the side of the tent just sort of to let whatever was out there know that, please don't step on me. And it ran off. And as it ran off, I heard a little metallic tinkling noise. And I thought, I'm trying to figure out what that was. And I thought, well, it sounded maybe like a big dog collar or something. Anyway, I got up and I went outside with my thermal imager, looked around, didn't see anything. So I went back and eventually fell asleep. In the morning, I got up, went outside, and on the picnic table near the tent, I had put a Coleman stove, an empty metal pot, and a big metal spoon. But I hadn't cooked anything. And I thought, that was the direction he ran. And I went over and I gave the table a shot with my hip. And it went tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. And it made that metallic noise. And I thought, he stumbled into this on the, as he ran off. So I was very excited, obviously. 2 nights later, 3 o'clock in the morning again, I'm sitting at that table with 5 or 6 other squatchers. And now I'm really tired and I'm bored and I'm hoping somebody else is going to say, let's go to sleep first, and I wouldn't be the first to chicken out. And every few minutes I'd stand up with the thermal and scan around. And the last time I got up and scanned around, there it was, walking at right angles to me about 100 feet away, clear as a bell. I could see it from like mid-calf up. And it looked just like you would think a squatch would, except through a thermal it looks white. And I had, on the thermal, I had a little digital video recorder with a very small 256 megabyte SD card, and I was saving the memory because I didn't have much memory, so I didn't have it turned on, which I've never done since. Stupidest thing I ever did. So I watched it for a few seconds, and I said, there's one now. And, of course, everybody stopped talking, so that was another mistake of mine. Lowered the thermal to turn on the video recorder, and by the time I got it turned on, which took maybe 5 or 6 seconds, and got it back up to my eye, it was gone. But I'd seen one to my satisfaction that I knew what I'd seen, and there was no doubt in my mind. And so I began going back to that spot. And for a year, every week or so, I'd go and spend the night there and lay out bait. And the video is called the Squeaky Thermal. And the reason it's called the Squeaky is I had a little, I was putting out all kinds of stuff, and I had a little squeaky bathroom toy that my grandchildren used in our jacuzzi. And I had that out there sitting on a stump. And the squeaky toy disappeared, and apples and bananas and Zagnut candy bars. And the long thermal, the 3.5 minutes, was taken last April, by me. But actually, I'd set the thermal on a remote because I'd heard something down there, and I thought, if he's watching me, maybe if I drive away, he'll be less cautious. So I put the thermal on a tripod that I had right there and started it up, and then I sort of went, well, I guess I'll drive away now, and got in my car and drove out of the area, stayed away a couple of hours, which is about as long as the batteries in that kind of thermal, the Raytheon 250, will last. And when I came back, indeed, the batteries were dead. So I didn't watch anything until the next morning. And when I got back home and watched it, there it was. And about half an hour after I drove away, this thing very, very cautiously approaches, like he expects a sniper to come up and blast him. And it comes up and sort of low crawls up behind the stump. And then you see an arm, the head sort of pops up and looks around, and then an arm reaches up, grabs the candy bar, and then it low crawls back, disappears into the woods, and then it seems to gain some confidence because about 30 seconds later it appears again, but this time it's standing up further, and you can see it from maybe the knees up and standing behind a tree, and it starts to, and once again, this is behavior that's been reported too, sort of wave back and forth, sway back and forth from left to right, and you can see its head and its shoulders and its right arm very clearly. And that's it in a nutshell. Ever since then, I've been going back some more. And
so on the footage, it takes the bait?
Pardon?
So on the footage, does it take the bait, or does it just walk around like examining?
No, it takes the candy bar and goes away. And then I don't know if it stopped to eat it or it just came back to have another look around. But anyway, I'm trying to get more footage now because it seems to have, I won't say become habituated, but I always go there and I always have the same car and the same tent, and I always go by myself, and I always leave out pretty much the same stuff, and I'm trying to get it used to, I'm assuming it's the same one, used to my presence and, the color of my tent and this sort of thing, and hopefully will realize that, I'm not out to hurt it. And, interesting, one night I left out, I don't remember what it was, bananas or something, and in the morning the bananas were gone, but on the stump were four little rocks that had been left in its place. The rocks were nothing special, but it had exchanged something for the bananas, which I thought was rather, touching. Hello?
Yeah. So I was also wondering, so on the footage, how long is the Bigfoot in the screen before it takes the bait?
Oh, perhaps a minute. You see its head and then its shoulders. The ground on the other side of the stump where the bait was, and the camera was about 85 feet away from the stump. The ground on the other side of the stump slopes downward, so it's down that hill a little bit, and you can't really tell if it's standing up and you're just seeing its head and shoulders, or if it's crawling and just sort of you're seeing its head and shoulders. I don't know. But as it crawls along or moves along, and then it sort of ducks out of sight and starts to, and it must have been crawling to get up behind the stump, because as it gets up behind the stump, its bulk starts to sort of spill over a bit on either side of the stump, and you can see, its head pop up here and there, its shoulder, and one leg sticks out, and then the arm comes up and grabs the candy bar.
Well, another thing I was wondering was, did you guys get any other evidence there, like tracks or calls or things like that over the last couple months you've been there?
Yes and no. I was driven there because there had been 3 previous sightings there by other people. That was I wasn't there just sort of out of the blue. And since then, I have had no sightings except for that one that you saw on the windy road. That happened just a little bit before that. And I'm not claiming that was a sasquatch, but I don't know what the heck else it could have been at 11:30 at night out in the middle of nowhere. I've had heavy bipedal running footsteps through the woods. I've had a couple of roars and branches breaking and that sort of stuff. The ground there isn't conducive to finding footprints. It's leafy forest with a fairly hard floor, and where the ground is soft, I always look in stream beds and stuff for footprints, but I haven't found any.
So, do you think that it's the same creature that you're trying to drag in, or are you trying to go get a different one every time?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. One of the sightings that happened there before I got there was I'll call it a family group. It was a mom, a dad, and a youngster walking through somebody came back to the campground at night unexpectedly and saw in their headlights, 3 of these creatures sort of walking through camp, apparently, looking, scavenging, I don't know, looking for stuff. My conclusion is that if they have one fault, they're curious, and that is that rather than going out and looking for them, the best way to do this is to sit back and let them come look for you, if you will.
Oh, yeah, that's what you're saying. So with the unattended camp, are you the first person that's done this, or? It says I
am. I doubt if I am. I think I'm the first person, frankly, that was lucky enough to do that. I'm the first person I know of that was just about to set up the camera, start it running, and go to bed, but then heard something and at the last second decided, well, I'll just drive away. So it saw me leave the camp. I'm the first person to do that.
So do you think that with the unattended camp, do you think that if you went back to the same area and tried it again, do you think that there'd be a possibility that maybe you could get the same one to come back, or do you think it was just by chance? Or
You know, I don't know. I've been back there perhaps 40 nights since that happened. I ended up moving to North Carolina, and so I'm only about 40 miles away from there. So it's easy for me to go over there and spend the night. And I'm always prepared. I have the equipment set up, but I'm always prepared. If I hear something, I'm always prepared to repeat that. You know, get in the car and just drive away and let the stuff run. But so far, I've let the stuff run, and I've been there, and I haven't gotten anything. And the nights that, and other Sasquatchers I'm sure will attest to this, that it is an electronics nightmare, and I don't attribute any mysterious or supernatural stuff, but luck will have it that I'll have 2 thermals and an infrared LED camera running, and 2 out of the 3 half the time, for one reason or another, something won't work. And it's terribly annoying, and there have been nights when I've gone down there and nothing will work for whatever reason. And then the next day, the candy bar will be gone, or the bananas will be gone. But when I have the stuff running, it seems that, they don't come, or, maybe they just aren't around. I can't believe they hang around the camp all the time. I think it's a question of really logging in the hours. If you put in enough time and have the cameras running long enough, day after day, week after week, year after year, eventually you're going to get lucky.
Well, another thing I was thinking was, I know when we go on our trips, because we go on squatch trips and all that too, I never thought of doing the unattended camp, or it's just that technique. Was it just kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing, or were you actually thinking about it before you got there? Or?
It was completely. It had never occurred to me either, and it was completely spur-of-the-moment. I was installing I had a Toyota Highlander, and I had the back hatch open, and I had stuck the thermal way in the back of the car, sort of behind the driver's seat, pointing out the back where I hoped it would be sort of camouflaged with all the junk that was in the back of the car. And I was just setting that up when I heard something walking down in the woods. And I thought, okay. Well, and then it just occurred to me right then, maybe if I drove away, it'll be more, less scared. And I guess it was.
So if it always takes the candy bar, did you get like a certain type of wrapper, like a metallic-looking wrapper? Like what's
actually, I usually, before then, I'd been leaving out peanut butter and apples and fruit. And that night, I happened to like Zagnut candy bars. And that night, I'd forgotten the peanut butter. So I decided to take one for the team and donate the candy bar. So I ripped it open so you could at least smell it. And it looks like a Clark bar, sort of. And I left that sitting on the stump, and that's what it took.
I didn't know if you meant like you left it in the wrapper, or if you unwrapped it, or...
Yeah, no, it was half open. I left it in the wrapper, but ripped open so you could smell it.
Oh, Mr. Greene, I was just wondering, many times when a Sasquatch sighting is reported, people report some type of strange odor. Did you smell any strange odors?
I haven't. I have yet to smell one. But I've certainly, I agree with you, and I've talked to an awful lot of people that have smelled them, and I haven't yet. And that could have been just a question of how the wind was blowing that night, It was a pretty still night, as I recall, but no, I haven't smelled one.
Well, do you think, because I know I was watching the 2 different thermal videos that you had on there,
right?
And it looks like on the newer footage that you could see the creature better. Is it a different type of camera, maybe, or is it a?
No.
The weather matters.
You can see the creature a lot better on the long footage the where it goes for the candy bar as opposed to the one where I'm walking up the road. When I was walking up the road that night, it was a little bit foggy, and I was holding the thermal and walking up the road looking through it because it was completely dark out. And when I saw something, I wasn't even, as you know, if you view that, it's hard to tell unless you wind it back and forth and look at it a few times. It's hard to tell that there's really even something going on. But I thought I saw something, so I started, and this was foolish of me, I started walking rapidly towards it, and hence the camera bobbing up and down because I'm trying to get closer to get a better picture of whatever's going on. And as I'm doing that, the thing sort of ducks down and sort of scuttles off to its right and disappears into the bushes. I went up to where it had disappeared and thermaled around, and I didn't see anything. Went back to my camp, and then I came back there an hour later to see if anything had happened or it would show up. And the only thing that I spooked was a deer. And the deer was markedly whiter than, the deer was very white, and it bounced off through the woods. But it was markedly whiter than the thermal image of whatever that was, which I would say that if it was a squatch, it was a young one, because whatever I saw wasn't more than perhaps 5 or 6 feet tall, but it was standing upright, sort of slumped over, and it wasn't a bear. And it could have been a very sort of heavy, naked person at midnight out in the middle of nowhere, which is it's more likely that it was a Martian.
Yeah, one of my co-hosts just called in.
Oh,
how you doing? But what was your question, Nick?
Oh, I was going to say, Mr. Greene, when you saw the juvenile Sasquatch,
right.
I know on another expedition the team went on, I wasn't available on that one, but Jeremy saw a juvenile Sasquatch as well, and you said it jumped across the road, Jer? Almost.
Yeah.
Did the juvenile Sasquatch that you saw?
Mm-hmm.
Did it display any high leaping ability or anything like Jeremy saw with his encounter?
It displayed, if anything, sort of a skulking. It was sort of like, oh God, somebody's seen me, I better get out of here, but I won't go too fast. And it sort of turned to its right and sort of went, well, I'm out of here, and sort of walked off into the woods. But it's not particularly clear. So I on that footage, I don't even really claim that's a Sasquatch. I don't know what else it could be, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that for sure that was a Squatch. But the longer, the good thermal, that is definitely a Sasquatch, no doubt at all.
Well, another thing that I was wondering was, we have a couple questions coming, and they want me to start talking about your Zor cemetery footage.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a question that I keep getting is, how come it's called the Zor cemetery footage?
Because that road, that dirt road, leads up to an old abandoned cemetery called the Zoar Cemetery.
And another thing, I'm getting a couple questions. People are wondering, so on the video, you're walking up this road, and was it just sitting there, or was it you just cut it off guard?
When you see thermal stuff at night, heat comes out white, at least on the Raytheon 250, and depending on the amount of heat the trees have absorbed, the trunks will often be quite white. And what you see is some white trees and one fairly large white tree, and what I saw was something standing also white, standing in front of the tree. So they sort of blended together, and that's why at first I wasn't even sure I was seeing I wasn't seeing anything exciting at all. But then it started to move, and I realized that yes, indeed, there was something there.
Oh yeah, Mr. Greene, I was just watching the cemetery footage, and I was looking at the trees around the area where the anomaly was spotted, and the trees were moving. I don't know if you could tell that, probably, but I just wanted to point out that observation. The trees were moving when this thing was going through the trees.
To tell you the truth, I didn't even notice that myself. I'll turn on my laptop right now and take a look. You mean it was moving them, or the wind was moving them?
The anomaly, whatever it is, was walking away back into the forest, and then the trees started to move. I don't know if it caused
the brush around where it was moving started to move.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it was disturbed.
Yeah. As it moves away from the tree, it moves into 5 or 6 foot high bushes and stuff. It probably rattled those. I'm turning on my laptop right now to take a look myself.
Yeah, I don't know, just a little observation.
You really have to, the best way to view that footage is to, once you see it moving, stop it, back it up, go forward a little more, back it up, and go back and forth like that until it absolutely disappears off to the right. And when you do that, you can see exactly what's happening. If you just watch it straight through, it's like, huh? You know, but
yeah.
You go back and forth, and it becomes very apparent that there's something there pretty big and that it has moved off.
The question that we're getting right now is people are asking us, how come the Zor footage, you can't see the Sasquatch as much as you can on the newer footage?
Well, for one thing, it was a lot further away. That was 85 yards away. I'm moving. It was foggy, and I probably didn't have it very sharply focused. That's why.
And another thing that I was wondering was, how much longer is the Bigfoot in the screen longer in the Zor footage, or is it longer in the I don't know what you call it, the squeaky footage? Is that what you call the new one?
Yeah, the squeaky footage is 3.5 minutes. The Zor footage is 6 or 8 seconds. So I mean, you're seeing a lot in the 3.5 minutes. In the other one, you're going to look at it and you're going to go, yeah, well, that's sort of interesting, but nothing to call up your mother about. But the 3.5 minutes is definitely a mind boggler, I think.
And right now, people are also asking us. So is the Zor footage, that's older, right? You said that's 2008.
Older, and that was older, but that was only taken about 1/4 mile away from where the other one was taken.
And another thing was, did seeing the Bigfoot with the thermal on the Zor footage, did that influence you all at all to use your thermals or to research that specific area at all?
Well, I always research that whole area, and what I do is I make it a habit before I set the cameras up for the night and get into my sleeping bag. I walk over to the cemetery at night with a thermal, and just because it's a nice dirt road and I can walk without running into a tree or making a lot of noise, and hopefully I'm going to run into something. But no, there's no special reason. It's just a convenient place to walk for 1/4 mile or so and back again and thermal around and look to see if there's anything around. And I do that every time I'm there.
Well, I was just wondering, I know it says that you've been out on the West Coast to do some Sasquatch expeditions.
Most of my time is spent on the West Coast.
Have you ever been to the Sacramento area?
Sacramento? No, I've been to Bluff Creek a couple of times. I haven't been to the Sacramento area.
We have some questions on the Patterson film. I was going to get to that a little later. But I had some other questions that people are asking me about some questions I had and other people on just your regular BFRO trips. I was going to ask them those. How does somebody become a BFRO member?
Okay, invitation only. And I don't mean that to sound highfalutin at all. Basically, you do the same thing I did. The BFRO offers expeditions, and they'll take people from the public, and they charge you $300 each. And you go with a group, and then there's a number of BFRO investigators there, and we always try to go to spots, obviously, where there's been some action in the past, and we bring our equipment, and we show the new people how to use it, and we share it with them, and we take them out at night and try and share this experience with them, and hopefully we're going to see something, and hopefully they're going to get interested in this enough to join us in the hunt. And if they do become interested enough, and they go on a couple of trips, and they're not nutcases, and we like them, we allow them to join. Needless to say, there are plenty of nutcases, and there's also a lot of people who have really overactive imaginations, and they go out there and they start seeing stuff and hearing stuff and getting spooked and crying on the radio and jumping in their cars and driving home, and we never see them again. And but they're really a little bit too high strung for this line of work.
Well, speaking of that, just me being curious, what is some of the weirder things that you've seen, like, people do on the trips, like people that...
Okay, I can give you a couple of good ones. We had one up in Vancouver Island where we had people, we always have radios, so everybody's talking to each other, and we had people sort of stationed out over a couple of miles of woods, sort of here and there, tucked away, and this was, I don't know, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's just supposed to sit quietly and hope that something will come by. And this one guy started saying, I can hear them coming, the usual, I can hear them coming, and they're getting closer. No, there's another one behind me, and I'm getting really scared. And then his as this went on over the course of maybe 4 or 5 minutes, his voice got increasingly sort of high and broken, and he ended up bubbling and in tears, going, God, you've got to come help me. I don't know what I'm going to do, and just crying and then screaming. So we went down there, and if there had been something there by the time we got there, with all his crying and screaming, it had run away. So I don't know if he was telling the truth or not, but I think probably he seemed to be a little bit over-imaginative. And I've had the same thing happen in upstate New York. He was standing with a group of maybe 20 people in the middle of the night in the middle of a field, and two guys who had come together all of a sudden said, oh, my God, what was that? And I was standing 2 feet from these people. One said, oh, my God, what was that? And he pushed his friend in front of him so that the friend would, take the blows or whatever it was supposed to happen. And the two of them fell down on top of each other, jumped, and there was nothing happening whatsoever. Jumped up, ran over, jumped in their car, and drove off, and we never saw them again.
Oh, wow.
But actually, this is up in Whitehall, New York, which is up at the very southern end of Lake Champlain. And there's a very interesting story there. We were in a Chinese restaurant. They were having supper, and the owner came over when he found out who we were and said that one of his cooks had a story to tell us. The cook, there were 2 cooks actually, and the 2 cooks had when I say just, maybe they'd been there for a couple of months, gotten off the boat from China. One spoke a little English, the other didn't speak any English at all. Shortly after they had gotten to America and were up there starting to work, they had gone fishing one morning on the shore of Lake Champlain. And Lake Champlain at this point, at the southern end, is like a river. It's maybe 50 yards wide, and it's still. And this was a Sunday morning, and they were fishing on the bank. On the other bank, to make this long story short, on the other bank, a sasquatch walked out of the woods and started wading through the muck along the other bank, looking for dead fish or something, I don't know. And the 2 of them remarked to each other, gee, I didn't know that there were gorillas in America. Isn't that funny? And then the thing disappeared into the woods, and they continued fishing. They went back and they told their boss about it. And Whitehall is the subject of a book called Monsters of the North Woods, which details all the hundreds of Sasquatch sightings around that town over the past 30 years. And the owner, of course, knew all about this. So he said he quizzed his 2 cooks, and they just thought it was a big monkey. And they were curious because they didn't think apes ran wild in America. And the guy said, well, no, and he whipped out the book and he showed them, pictures and drawings of Sasquatches. And they said, yeah, that's it. That's what we saw. And these guys, the interesting thing is, as far as being witnesses, these guys had never seen or even heard of Sasquatches. So this was completely new to them. They had no idea what was going on. So this was delightful. So we interviewed these two cooks, and we had one of them draw us a picture, and it looked like a Sasquatch.
Well, somebody right now is asking, when's the last time that you personally saw a Sasquatch?
What I've heard from whom?
Just somebody in our chat room is wondering, when's the last time that you personally have seen or heard a Sasquatch, like in the field?
Last April 28th.
Oh, really?
When I took that thermal footage, yeah. I mean, you're lucky if you see one at all during your whole lifetime. So this is not something, as you guys know, this isn't something that happens, 5 times a year or something. You're lucky if you ever get to lay your eyes on one. Yeah.
Another question
I'll tell you, once you've seen one, I mean, I had the bug before, but now I'm really got the bug. I'm back there, and I want to get more footage. I want to get it a lot clearer and, really nail this down.
Well, another guy was asking us, it's a common question that we often get asked too, but I thought that you'd answer better than I could. People are asking, what's the difference between like a Sasquatch and a Bigfoot and a Yeti and all that?
My personal opinion is nothing. They're all the same thing. It boggles the mind to think that a 7, 8 foot, 9 foot tall, upright, gorilla human-y thing even exists. It would really boggle the mind to think that there were a whole lot of different, or radically different anyway, varieties of it. No, I think they're all the same thing. Certainly the Sasquatch, Bigfoot in America and Canada are all the same thing. But I think probably the ones in Asia are too.
Another guy was wondering, have you ever heard of a Sasquatch or any creature like that inhabiting an abandoned houses or barns?
No, I have not. No.
Well, one of my questions...
That doesn't mean that other people haven't heard of it, but personally, no, I haven't.
How many times have you personally seen or heard of Bigfoot?
Well, if you count the Zoar thermal and the Squeaky thermal and the time the year before when I saw it, when I was with the group of people, 3 times, and it was all within a quarter of a mile of each other. And this is most of my hunting has been out in the Northwest, up in British Columbia, and upstate New York, and Northern California. So I was just really plain lucky to have it happen here in North Carolina.
Well, another thing that I was wondering was how many BFRO members are there?
I'm going to guess and say 200, 250 of us, investigators.
And
new ones joining, and then others that retire or lose interest. And I'll tell you, a lot of people lose interest because this isn't something that has a lot of positive feedback to it. You just go for years and years and nothing happens at all, and all you're running on is somebody else's stories. Well,
another thing that we're being asked right now was, and this is my personal question also, it just happened somebody else asked this. What is your opinion on pheromone tips? I know out of all the TV shows I've ever seen, they look for Sasquatch, and from our investigations, I've never seen them work.
Well, I can tell you one thing. You don't want to pick one up. You know how bad they smell. Jeez, they really smell awful. I think they're a pretty good idea. I've tied one on a string and tied it to my belt and walked along roads up in like the Olympic Peninsula and stuff at night, hoping to, sort of trolling with sound, if you will, or with smell, without success. But I think that doesn't mean that they aren't successful. It just means it wasn't successful that night. I think it's a very good idea.
Well, another thing is, do you prefer a research team with several people, or would you rather go out with only like 2 or 3 people besides yourself?
I think the smaller the group, the better. I don't think they're going to come around where there's a whole lot of people walking around in the woods at night. I think when you're camped by yourself and you're asleep, they're more likely to come in and poke around your campsite. But I don't think there's any advantage to numbers whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I think it's a big disadvantage. But a lot of people are scared, and I'm not trying to put myself forth as being particularly brave, but there's no evidence that these things are harmful. They're awful scary, and they're big, and they make a lot of noise, and they can smell bad and throw rocks and things. But the rocks never hit you, and the bushes and things they break never hurt you, and they never run into camp and rip your head off. So while they're very scary, in reality, they don't seem to be in the least bit dangerous. And I mean, down here, I'm much more worried about a drunken redneck than I am the Sasquatch.
Somebody right now is asking, in the chat room, they say, primitive, wouldn't it seem probable that the offspring of Sasquatch would spend some of its time in the trees during its early years?
Well, interesting point. Yeah, yes, and the younger ones have been reported frequently in trees, and I think the bigger ones might have a problem climbing some trees just because they weigh so much. But the younger ones are seen in trees and or jumping out of trees. There's something called the Lake George footage, which was shot by some teenagers taking photographs of each other or video of each other drinking beer around a campfire, and in the background, in the actually sort of the horizon of dark trees against a darkening but not dark sky, you see it's either an awfully big monkey or a Sasquatch in a tree, actually sort of climbing and then swinging over into another tree. And it's pretty far away, but it's clearly something, and it clearly isn't a person, because a person just wouldn't do this and wouldn't be that big. And anyway, that's the only evidence that, or documented evidence anyway, that I know of them in trees, but there's an awful lot of anecdotal evidence of people seeing them in trees.
And another question is, have you ever seen any of the Sasquatch nests or anything like that?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yes. And we call them stick structures. And once in a while you'll find a nest, and it'll sort of look like the ones I've seen anyway, sort of like a hunter had built a sort of a hide or a blind, scraped up, piled up stuff around to hide himself, and then sort of made a bed of leaves and stuff down underneath it presumably to lie down in. The stick structures aren't shelters. They seem to be some sort of we don't really know. I presume there's some sort of a signal or a sign. I don't know if it's a territorial sign or a warning or a welcome or what, but they're like crude teepees of trees, dead trees that have, usually dead trees. Sometimes they've been broken off and dragged over, but trees that have been dragged up 3, 4, 5, or 6 trees. And some of these trees are 25 feet tall. They're a lot bigger than you and I could drag over, and they've been piled up in like a pyramid, sort of crude teepee. And if you go out in the woods and you start looking around for these things, you'll see one in about 5 minutes, because 99% of them are just natural. When trees fall down, limbs fall off of trees, they fall down, and one end will stick and the other end will lean against the tree that it fell off of, and then over the years a few more will fall down, and pretty soon you have something that looks like a stick structure. A real stick structure is freestanding and obviously didn't happen by nature, and the trees were dragged over there and put together in a deliberate fashion, and it isn't a random act of nature. There's a lot of random nature out there, but if you examine these things closely, you can separate the wheat from the chaff.
A question that's being debated in our chat room that I think that I wanted to ask you to cover, can you bring up the fact that it's illegal to shoot a Sasquatch in some states and why that is?
Well,
and if you know of any
that is primarily, I think probably California, Oregon, and Washington. My feeling is that's primarily a publicity stunt by the local, well-meaning, but by the locals to draw attention to tourists that there's Sasquatches around and they ought to come and spend their money and look for them. But certainly, as far as being sort of a desirable big game, it's debatable. I can see some hunters wanting to, have a Sasquatch head on the wall. I mean, nobody else in the world has one. And but the fact that they're protected by law, frankly, I don't think means a darn. That if somebody's going to go out and shoot one, they're going to shoot one whether it's protected or not, and they'll either take the rap and take the credit or just shoot it and nobody will know about it anyway, or they won't be prosecuted. In most states, there isn't any law against it at all.
I was just saying that pretty much there's not enough science to prove that it exists yet, but once you killed it and had the body, then you killed an endangered species, right?
Well, yeah, and it's a good point. Sooner or later, somebody's going to either shoot one or more likely a logging truck's going to run one down at night. And then we're going to have a body, and then this whole thing is going to change completely, and it will immediately become the most endangered, sought-after, protected species you ever heard of, as well it should be. But until we have a body, most people just don't take this seriously, and you can't blame them. And I did this for years and years and years. Talked to hundreds of people who'd look me right in the eye, and they'd start, their eyes would start glistening, and they'd get all choked up just talking about what they'd seen. But until I saw it myself, it's hard to believe. And I gather you guys are squatchers, so you know what I mean. Until you see it yourself, you just can't buy into it 100%.
Mr. Greene, I just want to ask you a quick question about a pretty famous picture, and I want to ask you about the Jacobs picture. Are you familiar with that?
Oh yeah, no, a good friend of mine did that. Well, actually,
yeah.
got hold of it. Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on the Jacobs footage? Some people say it's a bear. Other
no, I know the guys that did the limb ratio analysis and stuff on that. It's a young Sasquatch, and unfortunately, if you've looked at the Jacobs pictures, you see sort of how odd they are, because it's like bending over and you're looking at it from behind and its head's down by its feet. It's a weird, they're weird pictures. They're weird pictures, but it's not a bear. It's not a bear. And there have been a number of Squatch sightings around there. I think it's just exactly what it is. Though that one, it is kind of, legs are skinny. The Squatch that I saw, or Squatches, were very stocky. I mean, they looked like football players with pads and muscle. I mean, just, steroids. And this thing is kind of scrawny looking. It doesn't necessarily mean that all Squatches are, especially when they're young, are big and heavy. So I think it's the real thing. And the guys the guys that took that had nothing to gain whatsoever. And that's one thing about, I mean, when UFOs or Nessie or this, the people that see this stuff, there's nothing to gain by standing up and making a fool of yourself in public, for most of us anyway.
Oh, I agree, though, because when we've been out watching, I've never personally seen one, but Jeremy's seen one, and our other teammate Brenda's seen one before, and I can see in their eyes too. They're genuinely like choked up when they see it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it's a very emotional thing. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, God, it's a wonderful creature, and to finally see one, and then, when you start talking about it, it all sort of comes back to you. It's an interesting phenomenon that people get so emotionally, involved with it.
Oh, I mean, I could vouch for them. The fact that I was there when they seen it, but I had my back turned. I definitely heard something big and large go across the road and stuff, and brushed the brush. But Yeah, I personally didn't see it, though.
Where were you?
We were, oh, Lord, we were probably near Lake Tahoe.
Right, okay.
Yeah, right by Lake Tahoe. It was in between Sacramento and Tahoe.
Mm-hmm. That's a good area up there.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah.
You want me to tell them the story? Well, the best way to explain it was we were out for 3 days near Lake Tahoe, and the location that we chose, it's kind of wilderness camping, I guess you could say, where there's not really a campground. You're kind of just in the middle of the forest.
Yep.
We went down this old fishing road that I guess has been abandoned since the 70s, and we were about 2 hours from the nearest town, which was Lake Tahoe. And anyway, so we were out there for 3 days. We didn't see any cars besides ourselves out there. And we had 2 days of nothing. We didn't see anything, but we did hear wood knocking.
Uh-huh.
We tried call blasting, and we did get some responses, but they were far away, like really far away. This was on the second night.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went to bed that night, and nothing happened. And then the very next day, what was kind of odd was when we woke up, there was footprints in front of our tent that we were sleeping in. There was like just one really large.
There you go.
Right.
So while you were asleep, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, that's when they come in. They wait till we're really dead to the world. Yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you.
But anyways, it gets better. So then the third day, it was at nighttime, probably about 12 hours, probably about 11 o'clock at night, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
We were standing in a triangle formation because we were talking, having a conversation, not even looking for the Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And because there was 3 of us, one of our guys thought that they seen a Sasquatch near our tent. So by the time we got all of our lights directed in that location,
right,
I guess whatever it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever it was walked through the tree line. It came out behind us, and I turned around right in time, and the spotlight hit it. And when my light hit it, it took off running.
Yeah, I'll bet it.
And I guess it ran probably 10 steps, and then it jumped. And it jumped very high into the forest. And that's what I guess one of my co-hosts was asking you earlier.
If mine had jumped. Yeah. No, I have never seen one. I've only seen them walking. But they can really move when they want to, I gather.
And another guy was asking us, could you explain wood knocking? Because some people are asking about that right now.
Okay. Wood knocks, I think, are an easy means to send out a sort of nondescript but somewhat unusual noise. It's like taking a baseball bat and whacking it against a tree, as you know. And you hear this loud pop noise, and it'll carry a long distance. And I think they use that to sort of locate each other, the way they might with howls, but more likely with a wood knock, because that doesn't really give anything away. You know, a howl is a howl, and you might confuse it with a coyote or something, but as people often do. But a wood knock is a wood knock, and yes, branches break off and fall down now and then, but wood knocks really sound pretty distinctive. We wood knock, when we're falling and stuff, we'll knock, and once in a while you'll get a response, and sometimes it's a long way away. Long way away.
Well, we have about 30 minutes left in our show, but I was going to get on another topic that we had requests for when you came on our show. You said that you're familiar with the Patterson footage and all of the hoaxes and things like that related to it, right?
I've been to Bluff Creek, and I know Bob Gimlin.
I was just wondering, we have people asking, how do you know Bob?
Well, last, where is it? I've got it. In fact, I've got the thing for it right here. Last May, they had the Yakima Bigfoot Roundup out in Yakima, Washington. It was actually a birthday party for Bob Gimlin. This is an interesting story. It's a birthday party for Bob Gimlin. And this was about 2 or 3 weeks after I'd gotten the squeaky thermal footage. So I was invited out as the guest speaker. And I went out there, and there were like 200 and 250, and this wasn't BFRO, this was squatchers from all over, had come to this thing basically to sort of honor Bob Gimlin and get together and sell each other T-shirts. But anyway, so I presented I showed the squeaky thermal to everybody. And after it was done, and you know that Bob and Roger have gotten really nothing but pretty much criticism and unending crap over the years about their film. And after it was over, and we're talking about getting choked up, Bob Gimlin came up to me and having seen the footage, and he said, "Mike, thank you." And his eyes were really wet. He said, "Thank you so much." You know, finally. And it was after all, and I'm putting words in his mouth now, but it was like finally after all these years, somebody's come forward with some good film to back him up. It was very touching. It was very touching. He's a nice guy, and I mean, this guy he's a cowboy. You know, he's not a sophisticated guy, and I'd believe him till the day I die. And Bluff Creek.
Yeah, there are some people asking, could you talk a little bit about where you can find your footage?
Sure, yes. Bushloper, BUSHLOPER, bushloper.net. That's my website, and you go on there and you can read all about me and all the different trips all over America and Canada and blah, 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 blah. And you can download that 3.5 minutes.
Well, another thing was regarding the Patterson footage. There's a guy named Bob. Not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name. It starts with an H. It says that he claims that he was one of the men in the costume, because I said that there was like something like 10 or 15 men that have claimed that they were the creature.
Yes, there are a number of people who have claimed that they were the creature. I can't say they've all been, because you can't really prove they weren't. But when you look at these people and their reliability and their motives and the amount of a reasonable man would not assume that these people had the wherewithal, either mentally or financially, to perpetrate that as a hoax. If that is a hoax, it's the best hoax I ever saw in my life. I mean, that is a really good costume. It's a really good costume, and I'm a believer of Bob Gimlin. Roger's dead, but I'm a believer of Bob. I'll tell you, interestingly, the difference between my footage and the Patterson footage is theirs was a color movie camera, and you can stick somebody in a suit, and you can take a movie or a video of them, and you can look at them through night vision, and if you did it right, you couldn't tell if it was somebody in a suit or not. But when you take a thermal of them, it's all the difference in the world. You can't, I won't say you can't. I don't know how you could fake a thermal. If you put on a Squatch costume and go walking through the woods, and I took a comparison footage of myself in the same spot wearing nothing but shorts. And I'm 6'5" and 180, so I'm tall and thin. And my bulk is tiny. I mean, there must have been 5 of me stuffed in that Sasquatch. They're very bulky compared to people. And the heat signature, which is the key to all this, the heat signature is pretty uniformly anyway, white, which is heat. So this whole body is radiating heat. Now, if you put on a jacket and you take a thermal of a picture of a person, you see white hands and a white face and some heat coming through their blue jeans and their jacket. But it's very, very diminished where they have clothing on. So if you put somebody in a suit, it's not going to have the same heat signature as a live animal would. And the Sasquatch, as I mentioned earlier, the Sasquatch, its thermal image was I'll say light gray, as opposed to a deer, which really comes across almost pretty much white. But it was a uniformly even heat signature, and I don't know how you could fake that.
Well, another thing that people were asking me was, what about the Sasquatch gait? That they said that a human, they're not able to manipulate this just because the way our skeletons are made compared to them, like the way the arms are and all that sort of thing.
Well, the gait that I saw when I didn't have the video recorder on, when I saw it actually live and I hadn't driven away, the first time I saw it for, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds, it looked like the Patterson footage. Big, the arms were swinging, its knees were slightly bent, and it was taking large, sort of deliberate, slow strides, sort of da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. But its arms were swinging back and forth, and you couldn't really tell the head from the shoulders. I was seeing it from the side, and the head, there was no neck. It all sort of blended in together. But well,
another question about your squeaky footage. A guy's asking us right now, what setting did you have on your thermal camera? What brand of camera was it?
It's a Raytheon Palm IR250 thermal imager, and there are no settings to be made on it. It's not like a camera where you can adjust the aperture or the lens or the shutter speed. You can adjust it for brightness and focus, but that's it.
Well, another question is, a lot of people claim that there was some sort of a deathbed confession. Is there even any evidence of that? I don't think so, right?
None. By whom?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I've heard two stories like that. I've heard one that Roger Patterson on his deathbed said, "It's true, it's all true," and then closed his eyes and died. But I don't know if that's true or not. I think somebody made it up, to tell you the truth. But I've heard that one, and then I've heard some guy on his deathbed said, "Yeah, it was me in the suit." But once again, nobody has backed that one up either. I think they're both stories.
And another thing that I was wondering was, I know Mysterious Encounters. I don't know if you're familiar with Autumn Williams. She's another BFR.
Yes, sure.
I know on her TV show they were talking about there's a hernia, or you could see some sort of hernia on the Patterson Creature.
On its right thigh as it's walking away, and this is interesting too, because as its thigh flexes, as it moves its right leg back and forth, as it's striding sort of diagonally away from the camera, a lump appears and disappears on its right thigh, and it looks like a herniated muscle tear that is sort of bulging out through the muscle, bulging out against the skin and the fur or the hair. Yeah.
Have you found anything on your trips to Bluff Creek?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I didn't see anything, but I found something rather interesting, which was, and once again, I'm not the first person to report this, large rocks. You know how bears will pick up a rock or a log and kind of flip it over to look for stuff underneath?
Yeah.
You will see, and I saw 3 or 4, and I'm just looking around my room here, my office, rocks that were the size of a TV, okay, maybe a 30-inch TV, a big rock that we couldn't pick it up in our wildest dreams. We might be able to lay down and sort of nudge it with our feet a little bit. But you could see where a rock like this had been picked up and like shot-putted into the brush maybe 5, 10, 15 feet away. And the rock's lying over there. The brush is all smashed down. It's still green. And here's this naked dent in the ground with like scratching in it. So they picked up the rock, sort of carelessly thrown it aside, and I don't know how much it weighed, 200, 300, 400 pounds, tossed it aside, and then looked in there for ants or worms or bugs or something. And I saw,
well,
I guess I saw 3 of those at Bluff Creek. And a number of, you know about tree breaks where they'll snap off a tree about 6 or 8 feet up in the air?
Oh, yeah.
I saw a couple of those that were obviously not accidents. They were live young pine trees that had been snapped off about, well, I'm 6'5", so about eye level with me, about 6 feet up, and the diameter of the trunk at that point was maybe 2.5, 3 inches, and it had just been, one of them had been just snapped down, and the other had been snapped and then sort of like twisted a couple of times.
Well, I have 2 questions regarding your squeaky footage.
Sure.
One person says, how tall did the BFRO people say it was, or how tall do you think it was?
Okay, obviously I went back there, and if you go to the website, you can see some of this. Though unfortunately, the way the land falls off behind the stump, it's hard to demonstrate clearly exactly how tall I think it was. But I would say it was about 7.5 feet tall. And
there's another guy on here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I took a strip I took a 8-foot 2x4 and marked it off on foot-long sections and held that up down there and then photographed it to try and get an idea, of just how where did this thing fall, during the daylight when you could see what was going on. And unfortunately, when I took the thermal footage, the leaves were they really hadn't come out yet. And when I went back a couple of weeks later to do some comparative footage with the 2x4 and myself running around with just shorts on, the leaves had come out a lot, and the background had changed a lot, and the heat signature of everything at night also changes depending on how hot it was during the day. So the comparison footage doesn't necessarily look exactly like what you see in the squeaky thermal, but it is shot from the same place.
Well, we are getting a lot of questions regarding the shoulder width. They were saying the shoulders look kind of similar to yours, or whoever was doing the person in the I don't know, I'd say it's the debunking.
Yeah. Well, I'm 6'5" and I weigh 180, which translates to tall and skinny. And I'm not a football player. I'm a skier, but if I had to play a sport and size-wise, you'd put me down as a basketball player. I'm tall and skinny. And there's a tremendous, whoever's saying that, is not reading it right, because there is a tremendous difference in my shoulder width and its shoulder width and my bulk and my arms and my neck especially and it.
Well, people right now are also asking us, what's your opinion on the misleading article on Wikipedia that's being posted on the BFRO website?
Okay, a professor in, what was it, Germany or something? Overseas, I believe, Austria, wrote a definitive article, because he's an anthropologist. He wrote a definitive article saying, Bigfoot's nonsense, blah, 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 there's nothing to prove it. And, of course, the BFRO thought, well, unfortunately, when kids in high school start to learn about Bigfoot, they're going to go to Wikipedia, they're going to look at that, and they're going to go, oh, geez, okay, forget it, let's go do something else. And we felt that article did not at all represent clearly, the possibilities here, and that this guy was basically an armchair researcher and basing it on, his opinion. And our opinion was that Wikipedia was not giving this a fair shake. So we started to write, our opinions and try and get Wikipedia to bump it up a bit there and not just write this thing off and have the only opinion on Wikipedia being that this is just nonsense.
And we have some other people right now that are saying, do you know if there's any sort of preview, if there's any kind of pictures of your film? Because there's some people in here that are saying that they're unable to pay and want to see if any sort of like a still image of it or anything like that.
Yes, there certainly are. If you can't afford $2, then don't buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks. is my answer to one of those. But the other one is, yes, if you go to the BFRO website, bfro.net, right on the front page, there are two. You'll see one thing that says unattended camp, and you click on that, and you'll get like 15 seconds of the thermal footage for free. And you'll also get a quick, if I remember correctly, you also get a quick glimpse of the thermal footage of me out there in shorts by comparison. You will also get on the right side of the main page, you'll see a guy sitting in a chair in a shirt talking, and that is me giving a rather long explanation of what happened that night. And they can click on that and watch that for free as well.
Another guy was asking, has anybody ever offered to buy this footage from you, or would you ever sell the rights to it if anybody offered a really high amount? Or?
Some people have offered money for it, and I have refused it. Yes, right now I'm sort of like, I've got this, and it's something I always wanted, but I sort of don't know what to do with it now that I've got it. Exactly. So the answer is yes. Some people have offered to buy it and buy the rights to it, and I've refused.
And people are asking, I know there used to be, because I know I went on the BFRO website probably about a couple weeks ago, and they had a low version, like a low-quality version of your video, and people are asking if did they take that off?
They cut that down. Yeah, they were showing 2 minutes of the 3.5 minutes in a considerably low version, and I said, hey, excuse me, guys, but I'd like people to go to my website, and how about you cut that down to like 15 seconds, because I won't say you're giving away the show, but you sort of are. You're giving them the whole 9 yards. There were something like 86,000 people that watched the low resolution footage. Before I said, wait a second, enough is enough here. Let's not be quite so generous with my film.
I know people get carried away with like the Patterson footage and all that.
Oh yeah.
I know that was a smart move though to get the rights and things before people got a hold of it.
Well, I've had people go, it's unethical of you to charge to have people view this wonderful footage. And my answer is, if you'd spent the amount of money that I have over 20 years, I'm standing in my office now, and it is littered with video equipment and 2 thermal imagers and night vision stuff and video cameras and infrared illuminators and blah, 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 blah. I've spent a small fortune on this stuff over 20 years, and I don't think, I'm certainly not a rich guy, but I don't think it's unfair of me to want to recover a little bit of that money. And I mean a little bit.
Another thing was, how did you initially pitch your film out to the public? Like, how did you get it so publicized?
On the BFRO website. Well, the first people I showed it to was at Bob Gimlin's birthday bash, and that was.
What was everybody's initial reaction when you showed it?
Oh, wild applause! I mean, they were absolutely delighted. This is the best. Nobody else has come forward with any thermal image stuff like this at all, and they were delighted. I mean, all of us are seeking not recognition, but acknowledgement of our work and our efforts, and we all want to sort of have people pat us on the back and say, good job, you finally proved something. And when I showed that to these people, they said, good job, you finally proved something. And they were very enthusiastic and supportive.
Well, right now, we also have people asking, how many of the professional people at BFRO analyzed your film?
Jeff Meldrum, Dr. Meldrum, and Dr. Bindernagel were there. And Dr. Bindernagel's response to it was, that's absolutely amazing. But remember that I mean, what you see is what you get there. Unfortunately, the thermal footage it's taken. This thing is, for most of the time, it's either crawling or hiding and popping up here and there, and then it's standing behind a tree and weaving back and forth so you can see it. It doesn't lend itself, like, say, the Jacobs footage. It doesn't lend itself as well to limb ratio comparisons and that sort of thing, or like the Patterson footage, where you can, there have been all kinds of studies and breakdowns of gait and, foot construction and one thing and another that this does not lend itself to there. So Meldrum thought it was great, but he didn't say, I got to have a copy of that so I can look at it and figure stuff out for myself, because it really, frankly, and he's right, it just does not lend itself to the kind of analysis that he would have liked to have done and that he's done on the Patterson footage. But hopefully next week that'll change. If I get lucky again down here. Just got to keep knocking at the door, and sooner or later, hopefully, it will open again.
Another thing I was just wondering was, whatever happened to your trip? I know you emailed me saying you had to go home early.
Oh, that was last Friday night. Yeah, I went. There were 4 or 5 people, investigators with me, that we were all going to meet Friday night, and they were waiting for me out in the rain, about half an hour walk off into the woods down there. And so I set off in the rain, and by the time I got there, and I had to GPS it because it was really black and there's no trail. But by the time I got there, I was the woods were wet, the streams I was wet up to the knees from the streams. And by the time I got there and set up my tent, by the time I set up the tent, it was raining so hard that the inside of the tent had water in it. My sleeping bag had gotten wet in my pack. It wasn't very cold, but I got in my sleeping bag and tried to go to sleep. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and I was just soaked. Every time I'd fall asleep, my feet would stretch out off my foam pad into the water that had collected down at the foot of the tent. I was just wet. So I got up and decided I was going to, sort of bushwhack back to the car. It was pretty foggy out, and it isn't a bad walk. I mean, this was not a survival situation, but I couldn't pick up in the dark with the fog. I couldn't pick up sort of the way back that I had come in, and so what normally took me about a half-hour walk took me an hour and a half to get back to the car. So I got home at 5:30 in the morning, just soaking wet and really tired, and annoyed at myself for having gone off there in the first place.
Well, I know right now there's a lot of controversy going around our chat room over your films. The main thing seems to be like with the people in our chat room that are asking me questions that are kind of on edge between your film. The best thing I could tell them, I guess, the best thing you could tell them, they were just wondering, what's some of the credentials of some of the people that have looked over your film?
Well,
what's some of
the credentials? I guess the credentials of the 250 Bigfooters at Bob Gimlin's are that they're the guys that have been doing this as a hobby, for God knows how long. Bindernagel loved it. Matt Moneymaker loved it. He's head of the BFRO. My credentials speak for themselves. I've been a chief of a fraud bureau, state criminal fraud bureau for 20 years. I'm a court-qualified question documents examiner, and I've got a master's degree in behavioral psychology. So, I'm not some redneck from Tennessee who's got a fursuit stuffed in a meat locker and he's trying to sell it as, the real thing.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left in the show.
Yeah.
I was going to see if, any of my co-hosts have any last questions or anything.
Sure.
Do you have any questions or anything, Nick or Tim?
Me? No. I've fired off all my questions that I wanted to ask.
Yeah, same here. I've just been listening, and I just want to let you know
It's been really great to listen to you and hear your experiences and everything, and I thank you for coming on
Definitely.
the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. I would like to say one thing, if I can, at the end here, which is...
Oh, go ahead.
I would really... This is not a hobby that requires... You don't have to go out and spend all the money I did. I would suggest that people who like to go camping read a couple of Bigfoot books, and when you go camping, keep your eyes out for this stuff, for smells, for footprints around your camp at night, for tree breaks, footprints, wood knocks, strange noises at night. Keep your eyes open, because most people, most of my life I wasn't paying any attention to this stuff at all, and I don't know how much, if anything happened around me, but it really adds an element to camping and backpacking that makes it's interesting without it, but it's a heck of a lot more interesting with it, and I would encourage everybody to have a camera in their pocket and keep their eyes open.
Well, another thing that I was wondering, because we have about 100 questions sitting in our emails for you about this.
Sure.
Yeah, we have a lot of requests right now. It's just try to get you, if you could do some sort of a follow-up show, probably like a month or two, if it's all right with you.
I'd be glad to. Sure. Just give me a call.
Yeah, we are swamped with questions. There's like hundreds of questions coming in our email right now.
Good. Well, I'm delighted, and I'd be, of course, give me a call and let me know, and I'll be glad to come back and answer any question I can. And maybe, though I doubt it, hopefully I'll have some more interesting information when I talk to you again.
And another thing that before we end the show, I was going to see if you wanted to say anything about any links you want people to look at, or where to get your videos, or anything like that.
I would say go to bushloper.net, and you can read all about me, and you can read all about Quebec and British Columbia and Vancouver Island, and my thermal boating trip up in the British Columbia coast, and one thing and another. But there's a lot of stuff. I've been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot of stuff there. It's interesting reading. Even if you don't pay the lousy $2 and watch the thermal, the rest of it's very interesting reading, I think.
Well, we have about 1 minute left in the show. Thank you for doing a show with us again, Mike. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I'd be delighted
to
come back. This has been a nice evening. I enjoyed talking about it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night, you guys.
All right,
good night.
Bye.